Hi folks, John here from Camp Falakwa, and I want to share 90 seconds of nature with you today. Now I'm up here at the playing field at the top of the hill because I want to talk about one of the four primary trees that grow here at Camp Falakwa, and that is an aspen poplar, or trembling aspen, and they are these beautiful, bright yellow, right now anyway, trees that grow all over Alberta and all over North America. Aspen poplar are very interesting trees. A couple cool things to know about them. One is that the trunks on an aspen poplar, if you wipe your hand on it, will produce a white powder. And that white powder is a natural sunscreen. Can actually be used by you to protect your skin. You can wipe it on your skin. It's only about SPF 5, so I wouldn't leave the banana boat at home, but it does work in a pinch. They also have interesting leaves, and their leaves have a stem that is flat and is rotated at 90 degrees from the leaf itself, which means that they flutter in almost any breeze. That's why they call them trembling aspen. The inner bark on an aspen poplar also contains a lot of vitamin C, and in fact what we see here is an old scar from where a moose or a deer has chewed up that inner bark in the cold winter to help keep them going. The most interesting thing I think about aspen poplar is that it's a clonal tree, which means that it grows a lot of the time by sending out shoots and growing another trunk. And so all of these trees that we see right here, all about the same stage in terms of change in color, are probably one organism. Very cool. If we look around the field here, we see there are groups of trees that have already lost their leaves and groups that are just changing. And probably what that tells us is that those clumps of trees are just one organism. In fact, there is a grove of aspen poplar in Utah that is estimated to be anywhere up to about 80,000, 80,000 years old. Very, very cool. Hope you're having a great day. Hope you enjoyed 90 Seconds of Nature. We'll talk to you soon.
Hi everyone, my name is Curtis. I'm the convener of a monthly forest church that meets here at beautiful Shekinah, one of our Mennonite church camps out here in Saskatchewan. I've been asked to talk a little bit about what we do and how it is that we do it. Forest Church is a monthly gathering on the first Sunday of every month at 3 o'clock in the afternoon where we meet here at camp for outdoor worship. That means we have creation both as our sanctuary, we worship in the outdoors, and creation makes up our worshiping communities, in that we join with the trees and the river and the wildlife in praise to God. What do we do? How do we do it? Well, it can look a lot different from one month to the next, but often includes elements such as campfire singing, sharing scripture readings. We have often times of discussion or sharing in one another's lives, and often it includes prayer as well. Another thing about Forest Church that after our formal time together is done, and usually it's relatively informal, people have time to walk around the grounds of Shekinah and explore, and we consider that part of the worship experience too, and that just spending time in nature is part of the worship experience, even if it's not the formal time together. Another way of how we do it is we have shared leadership so that different people take turns bringing the input for different months, and that way you never really know what you're going to get. Lastly, I just want to mention that for 2025, we have a theme that sort of guides our reflections, which is to everything there is a season. That's who we are.
Hi, Ian here at Langley Mennonite Fellowship in British Columbia. We were awarded at Langley Mennonite a emissions reductions grant this year. We're really grateful to Mennonite Church Canada and the Sustainability Leadership Group for providing that opportunity. We have a small group here at Langley Mennonite Fellowship who discuss climate change and are discussing different ways that we can live responsibly and sustainably given our current climate crisis. Part of our discussion was trying to figure out how our building could have less of a carbon footprint. And we did some research. We attended a webinar put on by Mennonite Church Canada called Energy Efficiency Faith Buildings, and that was terrific. We got to know some of the projects that are going on in churches around the country, and there were some experts who provided some tools and some know-how, responded to some questions. One tool that we found really helpful was this pyramid of conservation, and it outlines what our priorities should be in terms of reducing our carbon output, also where our efforts could be most utilized and be most effective. And out of that little informal audit that we had, we determined that we needed to get heat pumps. Our HVACs were well beyond their expiry date. They needed to be replaced. They weren't working all that efficiently, so we wanted to find a better replacement than the current HVACs, the conventional HVACs. So we decided on heat pumps. Now, paying for HVACs in a large building, well, that's quite a costly venture. Heat pumps added about 60 to 70% to that, but this group of people discussing creation care in our congregation wanted to propose this to having heat pumps in the congregation and spending the extra little bit of money. The Creation Care group also in that proposal offered some pledges that they would financially support this to a certain extent, but we needed some more money. We began fundraising in our community, and we applied for a grant with the emissions reduction grant, and we are really grateful. That was a terrific benefit, and it was terrific to feel that Mennonite Church Canada and the broader church community was buying into our efforts to be more sustainable.
Germinating Conversations is a dialogue initiative that brings rural and urban folks in southern Manitoba together to dialogue on the themes of food, faith, farming, and land.
Germinating Conversations started in 2012 in a course on ecological peace building. And out of that conversation from a student in a classroom, we involved Mennonite Central Committee, Canadian Food Grains Bank, Arasha, and asked how might we gather folks for dialogue? How might we actually get together? That's looked like a number of things over the years. We've met in church basements, done a lot of that. We've brought urban folks out to rural areas to listen. We've had students involved in dialogues for the public. But the basic idea is to get people together, to mark some of the differences that might engage across different participants and invite those differences into conversation.
It's really important for us to think about our food, where we get it, how it comes to us, how we consume it, all the different issues around sustainability. It's really important because if we don't think about it, we just tend to ignore it and it doesn't do anything, and we just go mindless in this world.
And I think that talking about food and faith, farming and the land is a really interesting way to get people interested in the conversation around creation care. It's something we all have in common, and it can lead us to really fruitful conversations about how we can better care for all of creation together.
If you're curious about what we're up to and maybe aren't in Manitoba, check out this book that we published called Germinating Conversations. It's available at Commonword. And if you want to engage with it in a small group or in a church setting, there is a study guide in the back to help walk you through. I'd love to chat with you more about it.
Some people call what we are doing simple living, or ask if we aim to be self-sufficient. The simple answer is no, though it may sometimes look that way. Over the past few years, our family has made significant changes in how we live. We grow perhaps 90% of our food by hand, both vegetables and staples like flour, corn, and dry beans. We heat and cook using wood, also cut by hand, plus some solar cooking in the summer. We ride bicycle nearly everywhere we go, and being rural people, nothing is nearby. The details of doing those things fill our days. None of it makes us perfectly righteous or self-sufficient, but sometimes it may be helpful to pull back and look at the broader picture. Can we imagine living without exploiting the land and other people? As we understand it, that means finding lifeways which don't need fossil fuels or electricity, and, maybe harder, being content to live that way. Part of this is basic fairness. The whole world can't live like North Americans, so we need to undevelop to meet our sisters and brothers around the world on some equitable middle ground in terms of power and resource use. Doing that, we see there are certain things we cannot use because using them almost always causes harm, sometimes on the extraction end, sometimes on the pollution end. Many of the things we do, whether threshing grain amaranth in our home-built treadle thresher, foraging soapwort for soap making, or patching pants, are part of trying to live into that larger vision. Much of what we do is experimental. We can't just copy what people did in the past because that led to the present. So we recombine elements from many cultures, learn new ways, invent. We are far from perfect. Our lives are full of struggles and compromise. But this is not an experiment where we go home at the end of the day. Instead, the experiment is home. Through our living, we want to journey toward a way of life which cares for others, within the bounds set on us as finite little creatures on a finite little earth.
As people of faith, we are committed to peace and, therefore, also committed to reconciliation. We support the land offenders in their continued peaceful occupation of their territory.
In the 18th century, if a sea voyage lasted over 3 months, it was simply assumed that at least 50% of the sailors would mysteriously die of scurvy. Symptoms would start with fatigue, but then escalate to teeth and hair loss. Old wounds would reopen, and then inevitably death. And nobody knew why. We've since learned that scurvy happens when we don't ingest enough vitamin C in our diets. Our bodies need vitamin C to produce new blood vessels, cartilage, muscle cells. In a sense, vitamin C literally holds us together. So what does vitamin C have to do with the climate crisis? In my own ministry, I primarily engage with younger generations. And in my experience, young people are deeply aware that the climate crisis is real, that it's looming, and that it's going to have tangible impacts on their lives. They know our species is on a long voyage, sailing into deadly, uncharted waters. And so stories emerge about what it means to be on that voyage. Stories like, our lives will be over in 25 years. What's the point of having kids if the world's just going to burn? This is the worst time to be alive. And I hear these narratives time and again, and then they get reinforced in the news cycle or on social media, and it starts to take hold. I am increasingly convinced that we humans cannot survive on that kind of narrative diet. Just like our bodies need just a bit of vitamin C, we need to regularly ingest stories of tangible hope, or else I think we start getting the spiritual equivalent of scurvy. Something inside us starts to fall apart. And so for me, when it comes to ministry in the climate crisis, I think one of the most important things the church can do is tell stories of hope, because they do exist. You know, if God is the author of life and harmony, then anything we see in the world that pursues life and harmony is participating in God's action. So I can tell stories about how, Brazil has lowered rates of Amazon deforestation by over half in just 2 years. Or how Australia has reduced its plastic pollution in its waters by over 40% in the last decade. Or how renewable energy seems to have reached a tipping point. And it's likely, some think, that air pollution will only decrease from this year forward. Now, does that mean everything's fine? No. But stories of hope provide essential nutrients to our narrative diets. And the church is uniquely poised to offer them, to offer how God's larger story can hold us together in these uncertain times.